with Amanda. Her filming is Leaving Charley. It's a short film in competition at our festival in London. In London? I don't know, I'll point to the background. Congratulations, it's on here somewhere. In London.
We're here, that counts.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for joining us. I know it's an obvious question, gets asked all the time. I've seen it, but for the benefit of people who haven't seen it, can you please tell me what the film's about?
The film is about a young queer sex worker and just her experience with that. It's 15 minutes, just as a slice of life. So.
And what's your? I always introduce you as the filmmaker. What actually is your connect? How are you connected to this film?
I did a lot of things, and that was really a budgetary decision. I wrote the
You're
film.
not alone. There's lots of filmmakers here to do.
I heard. They keep introducing themselves to me. They're like, I did everything
I did
too.
everything, yeah.
No, I definitely didn't do everything. But I wrote it, I directed it, and I starred in it as well.
Now, I know, interesting. We just talked about it very briefly about being. That's why I call it plate spinning. But you're doing all these different things. And I don't think it's done for budgetary reasons. But actually, and that's great for experience. I know it's wonderful. But what would you actually do if you could just do one of those elements? And if you could, is there one thing you'd rather do than the others? Because it is tough, and we know it's very, very tough in any aspect of filmmaking.
That's like asking someone what your favorite film is.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm just kidding.
What I'm trying to say is you may not have wanted to do all that. You know, you might prefer just to do the writing, or I guess it might be.
Funny, I'm definitely not a writer.
Okay.
That was like by the skin of my teeth. I got nothing done. But I have an acting background, and I always came from an acting school, and I didn't even. I directed the film because I had a specific vision in mind, and I didn't want to be one of those people that was like, oh, but what I really want to do is direct. And of course, when we wrapped the film, I was like, oh, but what I really want to do is direct. So I would have given a different answer before this film, and now after making the film, I just felt.
So you've got the directing drug or whatever it is. Yeah, okay.
I felt more at home behind the camera. I felt. Like I just wanted to diversify the stories that I was telling and keep telling them, and that was I felt at home there, and that surprised me.
And would you mind, if it's too personal, you don't have to answer this, but where the germ of the story came from? How did that all sort of come about?
Oh, it's a true story.
Okay.
So I mean, it's not entirely, but it's based on my experience as a sex worker, and that's why it was important, and that's why I told the story.
Okay. And I would imagine that most people would balk at the idea of saying, well, no, because it's a personal thing, and this is a particularly difficult subject matter, of course. Mm-hmm. Any kind of reservations about that? You must have had some kind of reservations.
I did have reservations in the beginning. The worst part was having to tell my family. So we crowdfunded about a third of the film's budget, and before I put up our crowdfunding campaign, I had to call my family and essentially come out as a sex worker.
Right.
I actually don't mind talking about it to strangers. I think I have an incredible amount of privilege in my life, and my circumstances allow me to tell my story without really any fear of, no fear of retribution, but very little fear, whereas other people could lose their other jobs or lose their children, or, there's a lot of stigma surrounding sex work, and I am just in an incredible place where I can tell the story with little to no fear of blowback. But telling my family was a really big hurdle for me.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. So,
okay.
but it went okay. Especially my 89-year-old grandmother was such a gem. She's from New York City. We all are, but she's from New York, and I had called her, and I had this gigantic speech prepared. And I was like, I want you to know, I'm the strong woman that you raised me to be. And she was like, it wouldn't have occurred to me that you would have compromised yourself in any way. And she's like, you've always been the strong woman that we love. You've always done what you had to do. So she was just the most amazing about it. And so it did go. It was a little bit hairy, but I got really supported. I was supported for it.
Yeah. And would I be right in suggesting that you've had? I mean, I don't know, so I'm asking the question. You must have some really positive feedback, though. Some people have seen the film saying, oh my God, we've seen the film, and like me, we don't know how you're going to talk to us. So yeah, can you give us a sense of scale of how that's gone down with strangers?
The response to the film has blown me away. I had no idea that it would have been such a positive response. The one response I really don't like is a lot of people are like, I'm really sorry that happened to you.
Oh,
and I'm like,
not sure you want, yeah.
I'm like, no, nothing happened to me. I had agency in my whole experience. The film does just depict my sexual assault, which happened while I was doing sex work, but it's also like I've also been assaulted while not working in sex work. So it's just one of those things. People are like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, no. But mostly it's been a really positive response. People are interested. I want to make sex work really accessible to people, and I want to be a safe space where people can come to ask questions, because I like talking about it, because I really loved being a sex worker, and I'd like to continue to tell stories about sex workers and maybe illuminate the stories of other women who don't have the platform that I have or don't have the privilege that I have.
Did you write it, and I don't wish to sound patronising, if it does, forgive me, did you write it as a form of catharsis? And if you did, was the end result, having watched people's reaction to the film, part of that experience? I guess what I'm trying to say is, I mean, it's obviously deeply fulfilling. And was that the intention to begin with? And if it was, did it exceed your expectations? I kind of hope that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. It's funny because I didn't intend for it to be cathartic, but it was.
Right. But you've answered that better than I asked it, actually, to be
no,
fair.
It was like an unintentional side effect. And I mean, I think all forms of art are cathartic, and you're working through something in a way. And I did use it as a platform for that. But I really made the film because I didn't see anyone like myself and my coworkers in film or television. You know, it's hard enough as a queer woman to see representation of queer people in media and women in media, and then again to see sex workers in media. Sex workers are so poorly represented in
I'm struggling
media.
to think of anything, actually.
It's all rubbish,
Yeah.
honestly.
Really struggling.
I
literally can't think of anything.
I mean,
I'm sure there is, but I
there
can't
are like
think of it.
older movies like Showgirls and
Oh,
or
that's a
whatever.
load of
It's like
crap, though, isn't it?
yeah, and it's
It's
just,
like Hoven, isn't it? That sort of says it all, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah. There are very few films that portray sex work in a way that I really enjoy, and so I struggle to see people like me and my coworkers in the media. So that's why I wanted to make the film, because it's something that I want to talk about and I want to continue telling the story. Also, this has just like lit a fire because I've seen even more now that there was a positive response. People keep asking me to continue telling the story, which is like the best ego boost for a filmmaker ever. But there was just a need, but it was cathartic, and
right.
It was, put me in a really vulnerable position, and telling human stories from a vulnerable place is what helps us get past the division. And there's a division on sex work in feminism and society, so that was part of where it came from, but definitely a catharsis was like an unintended wonderful result of making this film.
Okay.
So.
And was this, I don't know your history, I haven't looked at your history, was this your first film?
This was my first film.
And had you done anything in any capacity in filmmaking before, or was this literally a bolt out of the blue?
I went to film school like a while ago, and I have an acting background.
Okay.
So I did go to film school, but I kind of was like, it was just more at the time to gain an understanding of what happens behind the camera. Because I think that's important. I certainly wouldn't want anyone directing me who hadn't taken an acting class or whatever. So I kind of like on the flip side, I think it's important to know kind of what's happening everywhere. So.
And now you've done this film. I'm guessing there's obviously others in the pipeline. I imagine maybe they're not far removed from this. I don't know. I've no idea. What's going to be after this, and what have you discovered about yourself? Have you discovered anything that you didn't realise when you were either making this film? That's a two-pronged question, of course, or post making this film that you didn't expect.
I think.
Because you seem very confident. I mean, you seem very confident, and you always hear people talking. Sorry, interrupt you again. You always hear people saying that they want to discover themselves. Sometimes I struggle to understand what that means, but I do know what it means. But I suspect that you are a well-rounded person, which is a compliment. But even did you discover something about yourself that you weren't expecting? I guess it's a simple question.
Yes and no. It's funny because I went to film school, which was like a billion years ago, and I spent, maybe like 10, almost 10 years kind of like shuffling around doing all these different jobs. I worked in wildlife rehab and rescue, and I was a computer programmer, and I did all these weird things that were not filmmaking or acting. Even though that's kind of what I knew I wanted to do, I got scared, and my now my ex-wife, but my wife at the time, had really encouraged me to write the film. I had been talking about writing a book about stripping and all of this stuff, and she's like, why don't you just make the film? She's like, let's just do it. And she really gave me the confidence to do it. And so for so long I hadn't talked about what I truly wanted because I was afraid of failing at it, and that was like the worst thing that could have happened to me.
We all worry about things that we'll worry about that.
And I was my own worst enemy, and she kind of just gave me the push that I needed. And when I said it out loud that I was doing it, and when I had envisioned that I would write it and she and I would shoot it, and I would play every character and wear a mustache, and she'd hold a camera and I'd hold a light, and that would be it, and I think I didn't really wake up to the fact that that wasn't what was happening until the first day on set, when the caterer was like, how many people am I feeding? And I was like, oh my God, 40. You're feeding 40 people. Like, I have 40 people who showed up to work today.
Shit.
Yeah. Someone's like, hey, do we have a petty cash fund? And I was like, oh, you're asking me.
Oh, hang
you're
on,
asking me? Like, I was like, I don't know. I guess that's my ATM card here. So, and I was able to get to the first day of set without doing that because of my producer, who, her name is Phoebe Brown. She's made documentaries, she's worked on Recre and television, and she's just the most phenomenal human being, and she did basically everything up until that day. And I was, being an actor and a director, you're kind of sheltered from a lot of stuff, which is great. My crew was wonderful about babying me, for the most part. But yeah, I think I realized just that I can do it. And now I say everything that I want out loud, which kind of, funny enough, rolls me into the next part of the question, which was what do you have in the pipeline? And I'm writing a feature script, and I'm also working on a feature-length documentary right now. But most related, I am writing, we're recutting Leaving Charley as a pilot, and I am trying to shop it as a series. Yeah, which wasn't my original intent, but I got so many inquiries about it, and I think it would be perfect for a television format. So now I keep saying that out loud when people ask what I want, and it's like, and also if you know Jenji Cohen, I think she would be the perfect showrunner, but that's just saying that. So that's what I learned, is that I just need to ask for what I want and then take the steps for it to be done, because if the worst thing that happens is that it doesn't happen, that's not all that bad.
No, I think if you can, God, I mean, who am I to know how tough people's struggle is to do certain things. I mean, if you can bear this kind of film to close scrutiny, and let's be honest, it's basically you, isn't it? It's about you. Then I think you can probably do anything. And again, that sounds a bit patronising, but no, it's not patronising, because you're doing something that 99.99% of people who had worked in that industry, I don't think would do, because it is so deeply personal. And hats off for you for doing that. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you can do that, then I'd imagine you can turn your hand to anything.
I hope so. I'm working on it. I feel very good, and just the continued response to the film is giving me more comfort and confidence, and so I feel very good about this, especially as my first film. Now I've seen it 755 times, and I'm like, I would have changed that. Or
cut that. Well, you can do it with the new cut. Yeah.
Right, and
well, you make it a little bit small. I mean, there's seriously, there's little bits you would chop out and just move around. And
so my editors, thank goodness, were phenomenal. I had two wonderful editors on the film, Carrie Schrader and Charley Fisk, and they took out a lot of stuff. I knew that I would be too precious about the cut. So,
hence the reason you have an independent editor. That's the thing, a lesson, isn't it?
Don't ever edit your own film,
no.
Like ever. I was willing to wear a lot of hats, but I would have cut the catering if I could have, but I wasn't willing to edit. And I had these two wonderful women doing the work, and they were really just like, this has to come out. And I was like, okay, fine. But yeah, there are scenes that we dropped that weren't They didn't really play for the short film, but they would be great intros to a B storyline for a series.
Okay, yeah.
Some things will go back in, some things will come out, and some of it is just me being self-conscious about my own performance, just actor stuff. So I've seen it a bunch of times now, and I'm like, I'm really critical of it, but I think overall for my first film on this circuit, I'm very proud.
I know you were talking about being at film school, but had you reached a point when you went on to these other careers in the program or whatever it was you decided to do? I think you said you worked in a wildlife sanctuary. But had you thought, before you started looking at this as a script or making something, had you kind of given up on the thought of any notion of being involved in filmmaking in any way, shape or form? Had that had that career path closed as far as you were concerned?
I hadn't really talked about filmmaking at all, honestly. I mean, when I went to film school, I had dropped out of uni. I was 18 years old.
Yeah.
I knew nothing about the world.
Yeah.
So, they're like, make your thesis film, and like my grand thesis in film school, I'm like, I literally know nothing. So I spent 10 years kind of collecting other experiences. And so, no, I don't think the door to acting for me, because I was still doing some acting. I did some other short films. I had been auditioning and acting for other films that were on the festival circuit, but I hadn't really thought about making my own film. So yeah, in a way, that part of the door was closed. Acting was still open, but yeah, I hadn't really thought about it until someone behind me was just like, do it. So a little bit of encouragement.
So now you're going to have to try and explain, if possible, someone's sitting there that may be watching this one day and they're unsure about if they should do something with their lives, not necessarily making films, it could be anything. What would you say to them? How would you sort of grab it by the scruff of the neck and say, you've got to do it? What would the advice be?
It's just, I think that everyone gets stuck when they want to do something, because especially people who, for some reason, grew up thinking that their ability has something to do with their worth, right? So your worth as a human being, as a caring person, as a friend, as a whatever partner, sibling, your worth as a human in the world is unrelated to your ability to do your job or your craft. But a lot of us conflate those two things. So I think that recognizing your worth as a human being is paramount, and then everything else comes second, because when you don't have ability, that's something that you can fail, you can try again, you can learn new things that you're constantly working on. Your ability never peaks, but your worth as a human being peaks from birth. You are worthy just because you're moving through the world. So those two things are separate, and I think this as soon as we can learn that they're separate and that our ability can be knocked down and that has nothing to do with our worth, then the more times we can try it and the less afraid we'll be to fail.
Thank you. And it's amazing. I know you mentioned that someone, I think you said your ex-wife pushed you to do this.
Yeah.
But what's incredible is, had she not said, who knows what would have happened? Just that one thing, I know if she's constantly pushing you, or she's, I don't know. But I suppose the point I'm trying to make is, you just don't know how the cards are going to fall without that kind of encouragement, do you?
No, and you know what? It's funny because she just was the first partner that I ever had that I trusted to still love me no matter what. She really pushed me there. She was like, it doesn't matter. I was a singer for a long time and I wouldn't sing in front of my partners. So like, oh my God, if I hit one wrong note, they're not going to love me anymore. Or like, so just ridiculous stuff. And so I really, really always push encouragement, unconditional love. If I have a partner or partners, my friends, I believe in like non-sexual intimacy. I hug my friends. I tell them I'm proud of them and that I love them. And I think that that's something that we can do. And even on my film set, so we had a entirely female and non-binary, gender non-conforming crew, which was extremely difficult to put together. But one of the main themes in the film is that women working together and supporting each other is not necessarily the toxic and catty experience that I think that sometimes the media makes it out to be. And so I wanted to echo that in my crew. And I think next, I really want to bring like men into that, because I think men society tells them that they can't express love or vulnerability. So I think that's what everybody needs, is unconditional love and vulnerability and support.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that.